as well. Okay, so welcome everyone to probably the very first episode of a podcast series of whose name we are yet to decide. So this series was originally going to be called Give and Grow Rich, and but yesterday I was having a realization. It's like I was having this realization that how our words are really important. And like actually I was having this deeper perspective for the last few days, right? And realizing how our words shape our intentions, how they shape our objectives, and how they shape everything. And so one of the things, for example, I was looking at my own goals that I'd written down. It's like goals in next 3 months, goals in a year, and it's like goals in 2 years and 3 years. And I saw that these are all like financial goals that I've put down. And because of that model, the the way I am thinking about my steps, I realized actually quite different. And so the thing that I realized a few days ago is actually I can change my goals rather than keeping them financial. I could actually shift them to the size of the tribe that I want to build, right? And focus entirely on value. And the reason actually I was having this thought process yesterday is because like I was actually reflecting on one of the conversations that I was having with a client. And like I'd asked him to like do some warm outreach and stuff like that. And like he was feeling very hesitant to do this, and I was kind of wondering, it's like, where is this hesitation actually coming from? And that is where it dawned on me that it's like it is coming from the language that we use. It's like because that language determines how the other person perceives what we are going to be doing, right? So, which is why I decided that it's like to even change the name of this podcast since it's just starting. It's like we have that freedom to play around with a few things in the beginning, right? So, I was actually thinking of either calling it the age of spiritual abundance, or the golden age of abundance, or something like that. So, what do you think, Shreya?
I think even just the age of abundance, because abundance is a concept within spirituality. There are a lot of overlapping concepts between the two. And I think the age of abundance has a nice ring to it with alliteration on the A's. I think I'm more of a grammar Nazi and more obsessed with words and how they flow together. So I think the age of abundance has a really nice flow to it. And of course, spirituality would be an important component in abundance and in understanding all the concepts around it. So I think just the age of abundance would be nice, simple, crisp, and very clear.
Awesome. Then that's been decided. So now this is the first episode of the Age of Abundance podcast series. So welcome everyone once again to the very first episode. Cool. So then coming to the nature of this podcast series, what I thought about is to connect with people to kind of understand about their experiences in life with respect to abundance. Like it could be financial abundance, it could be abundance in terms of their experiences, and what are the most important lessons that they have kind of learned along the way, and what are some of the most practical tips and techniques or tools that they can share with other people that would help them on their journey. So, with that, I would like to ask you, okay, so how has your experience been with abundance? Like, when did you first even come across this idea of abundance in your life?
So I would say probably a couple of years ago. I can't pinpoint exactly when I came across this idea, but I know a couple of years ago when I'd come across certain books that I was reading and just trying to understand more about what our purpose is in life. What does life really mean? I mean, society tells us that you go get a formal education, you get good grades, study hard, get into a good college, and then get into a good job, and then keep going until you retire. So along the way, when I had done most of these things, I'd gotten into working, and it's been about 6, 7 years now of working in the corporate world. And during this time, somewhere within me, I started feeling like, oh, I'm not feeling the happiness that I'm supposed to feel, or I'm not feeling the so-called success that is supposed to come by doing all of these steps. So that's when I started reading some books. I know one particular book that had a big impact on me was by Louise Hay, which is called You Can Heal Your Life. And
Mm.
in that, I started learning a lot about abundance. And of course, after that, there were many other books that came to me or content that I would find, and started understanding multiple different concepts within abundance, or even overlapping and related concepts. And that's when I first started going into this journey of exploring more of what actually is abundance. Because, like you said, there are so many different forms of it. There's financial abundance, there's abundance of love, of knowledge, and of other things in our lives, whether it's relationships or anything else. So that's probably when I first came across it. And then the more that I started exploring and going down that route, the universe kept sending me people that could even help me understand more about this, whether it's life coaches or mentors, or even discussions with friends. It started turning more into this, into this, I would say, probably realm and this aura of like talking more about what does it really mean, abundance, and what is life in general, or even how can we be grateful for the abundance that we have, what we already have in our lives, and what we want to continue to cultivate and continue to grow. Because a lot of times we don't realize what's in the here and now. We're so busy chasing these goals, or so busy thinking of what's next, what's in the future. We always want to plan. At least for me, I was always trying to think of what's next, like from school, then get to college, then keep working hard, keep studying hard, and then getting into a good job, and then keep growing in that. And actually, even while I'm using these words, it's I'm becoming more aware of the fact that even when I say working hard or working or studying hard, that also now I've started to understand more of, you know, the language, like you mentioned, you know, the language that we use and the impact that it has on us. Where now I realize that, you know, I don't want to be working hard. I want to be working lovingly, be working purposefully,
Mm.
be working meaningfully, and have these qualities be more involved in my work or in anything that I do, rather than in working hard. So yeah, coming back into abundance, that's when I first got into it. And I feel like it's a lifelong journey of continuing to learning, to delve deeper into it and learn more into it, and continuing to just yeah, get more involved in it. And there's no end to it, and I love it. I love that there's no end to it, because I feel like there is so much more that you can learn and so much more that you can grow through it.
Wow, that's so beautiful. So, this idea of like how life is already abundant and how you're so grateful for the things that you have, like, did you always have this kind of an attitude, or is it something that developed over time?
I think definitely something that developed over time, and more recently, I've become a lot more aware of it. Because while I've been very grateful and very lucky to have always had resources along the way, whether it's my family's support, whether it's support of friends, and having access to things that I wanted, even going right from the basic of needs to then having beyond that, having a good, nice life. So while I've always had this, there wasn't that awareness around it. I think in part
Mm.
because I would see people around me also having this. So until you see the stark difference, or you see when you don't have those things, or when you see people around you not having those things, then you become more conscious of it. Or even, of course, when you get older, I feel like as a young kid, I was just someone who just went along with everything. I didn't think about any of these questions. And of course, with age, when I started getting older, and when I did the things that I was supposed to do, and I wasn't getting, I wasn't feeling the way that I was supposed to feel, or I didn't feel like, okay, I've accomplished a lot, or I didn't feel like, okay, this is making me happy. That's when it made me realize that, okay, there's something else I need to dive into. Instead of looking externally, I need to look more at internally. And I started coming across these concepts of gratitude, which gratitude, in a sense, it sounds like a very simple concept, and maybe it is simple, but we do tend to overcomplicate it. But just going back to that, when I would think that, yeah, I have so much around me, and this can apply to anyone, even someone
Mm.
who feels like they're in a really tough situation. I feel like there's still always a lot of things to be grateful for. And we just need to be more mindful of that, or we just need to acknowledge that. A lot of times we're so busy complaining about what we don't have, that we don't appreciate what we have, and we don't see that. So, of course, for me, more recently is when I've become more aware of this. And I would say the first step is to being aware of it, and then to being grateful for it. Like, you can't be grateful for something unless you know that you have it, or unless you're actively conscious of it.
Mm.
Like even something like air, it's all around us, so we take it for granted. We don't actively think of it. But when I started doing more, getting more into yoga or mindfulness or meditations, that's when I started becoming aware of the most fundamental things that we need to live. So
Mm.
yeah, it has been more recent, and I'm really glad that it's come at a time where I'm willing to learn about it and I'm willing to take it further. Because I would say for me, even if it came earlier, I would probably be too preoccupied on my own route or my own path. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it has come to me earlier, but I haven't been conscious of it or I haven't acknowledged it at that time. But I feel like everything comes, even if it comes multiple times, it's coming at a time where you're able to make sense of it. And if you aren't making sense of it right now, that's completely fine. It'll come to you at another time when you can then grasp it and you can then start absorbing it. So I feel like for all humans, until we are able to acknowledge it and until we're able to make sense of it and imbibe it in our lives, the universe will find its way of keep bringing it back to us until we learn those lessons.
Right. Wow, that's wonderful. Okay, so could you share a little bit of background about yourself, like in a sense that, okay, what kind of education background you have, and it's like what kind of an experience do you have in terms of like, because you said you've been in the corporate world for like 6 to 7 years.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes, of course. So I'll go into that. So I grew up in Mumbai in a joint family, and I did my schooling, my education in Mumbai in India, and then my higher education I did from the US. And I was someone who didn't have a specific path that I felt like I wanted to get into. Some people know that they want to do science or arts or commerce or whatever it is. For me, I was always the type who wanted to explore a lot of things and then see what makes sense and what I find interesting. So ultimately, I did my undergrad in economics and psychology. And that time, psychology was something that really drew my attention, and I wanted to explore more on that. So I went ahead and started working with a clinic that worked with kids with autism. And while I was doing that, I realized that this is something that caught my attention theoretically, but in the practical sense, I didn't feel like it's something I could continue. And it
Hmm.
was something that involved a lot of my emotional bandwidth. And that's when I realized that probably going down the line of getting a master's in psychology or going into clinical practice is not something that I see doing full time. So
Hmm.
that's when that was somewhere around 2016, 2017, when a lot of startups were coming up in India, especially in Mumbai. So here, growing up here in Mumbai, I was like, this is a good chance to explore the startup world, because there also I can explore multiple different fields. I don't have to be limited to just one area and just work in that specific field. So I
Hmm.
got into recruitment, and recruitment I thought would be a good complement of my psychology background, extending in the corporate world. And recruitment has a good amount of sales also, and I was learning about many different industries while working with a VC fund that invests in many startups. So I did that for about 4 years, moved up the ranks in terms of doing more senior level hiring, more headhunting and executive leadership like hiring. And then for the past 2 years, I've been working with a global fintech and hiring not just for India, but for other countries also. So continued on this journey of recruitment. And along the way is when I started understanding more about things and started exploring more things beyond work in terms of how I want my life to grow, what kind of direction I wanted to take. And yeah, just being more conscious and more aware of what I can do outside of work, because I was like, okay, what's next now? Like now I'm working, now I've been doing this for 6 7 years, but what would I actually want to do next?
Okay. So before we move to what would you like to do next, I just want to understand a little bit more about, say, what kind of ideas did you have about the corporate world before you got in? Like, say, as a teenager or as a young adult, as like a 21-year-old or something. Like, we have some of these ideas. And then with your experience in the last 6 to 7 years, how has this perception changed? And how do you perceive the corporate world now?
Yeah. So before getting into the corporate world, I thought of it as something that was very black and white, where people are very well dressed, they very well presentable, they go and they work at their desk for those 8 9 hours in the day and then go back home. And that was pretty much what I thought, because that's what I saw in movies and TV shows. That just really well dressed people going to work, going to meetings. I saw a lot of people in these shows and TVs, movies and shows, just being involved in meetings. It seemed like something that was just pretty much all day meetings or phone calls or some sort of format in that. And then when I actually stepped into the corporate world, I worked in a very different environment because I was working with startups. So things were a lot more casual or informal in terms of even our dress code or even the way we interacted. It wasn't so strict about meetings and just having that much structure. I would say within corporate startups has its own bubble. So I haven't worked with a very I would say like a very technical sort of corporate environment, which may be someone who's doing, let's say, law or engineering or maybe one of the other degrees. I was in the arts, so I think the kind of work that I was doing was more probably or these specific environments of working with startups was more fluid. There was a lot of change. It was very fast paced, very dynamic. It wasn't very rigid or corporate like in what you think. When I thought of corporate, I thought of something very fixed, very rigid, and you just kind of move up the ranks, and there are very specific levels or bands or hierarchies, and you go up that. But in the startup world, I think things were a lot more dynamic. Things were constantly changing. So it was very different when I actually started working in that compared to what I imagined it to be. And then, of course, during COVID and then after COVID, everything became remote. Right now, I'm still working remotely. So I think that has been a whole different shift in terms of virtually interacting with people. My colleagues are all around the world. So that's been something that I never imagined I would be able to experience. I'd always thought of a corporate equals to an office setup and you being in that office for 8, 9 hours a day, sometimes 10, not even 12, is what I had heard, that it's something where you work long hours, you go well dressed, and you sit in the office and you do these meetings. But yeah, since I'm working remotely now for the past 2 years at least, it's been very different from what I thought it would be.
Okay, so how's your experience of working remotely been? Like, is something that is enjoyable, or you actually preferred going to the office?
So I would say there are pros and cons of it. For the most part, I find it enjoyable because I feel like I don't have to worry about commuting. I don't have to think about packing a lunch and taking that, or sticking to these fixed timings. So there's definitely that, but I have a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility to plan my schedule and be able to not have it be very rigid. And then there are downsides to it also, where you feel like you know your colleagues only virtually. You don't meet them in person. In person definitely brings a whole different dimension where you understand people a lot better. You can read their body language. You can interact with them in a similar space. You feel their energy, those kind of things, and you even know them beyond work life, because right
Hmm.
now when you're working remotely you have those limited hours when you're interacting with them, and that time it's just like a very strict agenda of just getting this work done. So you don't get to know people beyond who they are at work. So I would say that's definitely one of the downsides of working remotely. And then also for me personally, I've had a struggle with balancing work and life, so to say, because with remote working there's really never any end time to, so to say. So you feel like when you're working at an office, there's like a fixed time you want to get into the office, a fixed time you get out of the office, your colleagues around you
Hmm.
are leaving. Previously, when I worked in an office setup, my colleagues would leave by 6. So even if I felt like I have some more work, everyone's leaving. So even I would pack up and leave. But then here
Hmm.
I'm working remotely. So I feel like I would just end up working even sometimes later into the night and not even realize. Sometimes I would have scheduled breaks, but then I'd feel like work is spilling into that. So I wouldn't end up taking that break versus in an office setup, everyone would eat lunch together. So
Hmm.
I would automatically end up getting up from my desk and eat lunch with my colleagues. So there's pros and cons to it. I think overall, I definitely enjoy working remotely, but I'm aware of some of these downsides that come with it.
All right, cool. So then, how would you say is your overall experience now that you've been in for like 6, 7 years? Is this something that you would recommend for other people, and is this something that you feel like, yeah, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, or is it? So, what is your experience overall?
Yeah. So I would say it's definitely been a great learning experience. It helps you build a strong foundation. You're able to learn how to work with other people, which no matter what you do in life, you will be interacting with other people unless you,
Hmm.
I guess, decide to go and live in a cave or something, maybe then. But even then, you would still probably need some kind of social interaction. So I feel like working in a corporate setup, in an office environment, or with a company definitely gives you those skills of interacting with people. It helps you understand that, or it helps you feel like you're part of something bigger, you're contributing to an organization's success. So there are those, it definitely helps you get a strong foundation of learning. Here you are accountable for your own work. You have to deliver within certain deadlines. You have to follow a certain work ethic. So I feel like it gives you that discipline and it helps you do that. So there are definitely pros to it. And then I would say for each person, depending on how they're liking it or how long they might want to continue with it. For me, when I've started becoming more conscious of, um, of understanding more of what is my purpose, why am I actually doing this, what am I getting out of this? Is this something that I'm really interested in? I would say it's a mix because there are some parts of the work that I like. But then when I think of the larger picture, I feel like I would maybe want to have a bigger impact or maybe want to do something of my own, try out that at some point and see how it goes. And of course, this is always an option. If something doesn't work out, I can always come back to this. So this has given me a strong foundation. But in my mind, I am thinking of like what's next and how much longer might I want to do this, or what are the reasons I'm actually doing this, and what can I explore if not this.
Cool. That sounds wonderful. So maybe we can explore that together a little bit. Yeah.
Sure.
What is next? So, if we just give our mind free rein, and so what kind of, like, if you had absolute guarantee that you're bound to succeed at anything that you do, like whatever you do succeeds, like you have received the blessings of Lakshmi Devi, right, and other goddesses, and they have blessed you that yes, whatever endeavor you choose to do, you will absolutely succeed, and you will have like astonishing, unbelievable levels of success. So whether you choose to continue in the corporate world, you will rise through the ranks and you will reach whatever level and all that stuff, right? So now, if you know for a fact that you have this blessings from the goddesses, now what kind of an impact would you actually want to have on the planet?
Yeah, so that's definitely a question that I've also been asking myself, and I think it is something that's a very big question. So I always try to break it down or think in terms of, yeah, what kind of impact would I want to have? I think along this journey, these past 6, 7 years, when I've been working in the corporate space, I've seen people around me experience different types of burnout or just feel a lot of work pressure, a lot of they're constantly trying to prove something to themselves or to people around, and even hesitating to take time off or to take leaves or just to spend time on themselves or be there for their family and things like that. So I feel like I would definitely want to do something that can help people in these environments, even if they choose to continue in these corporate environments, help them understand that it's something that the self comes first. Because sometimes when you're working with a corporate, you get very caught up into this idea that I'm just here to deliver on these goals, or I'm just here to provide this service for this particular employer, and you kind of lose a little bit of yourself in that process because you become so, or either consciously unconsciously, you become very tied into that corporate. It becomes part of your identity. When people introduce themselves, even in informal settings, they always talk about the work that they do. At least here in
Hmm.
India, I know in some other countries it might be different, but in India it's always like they introduce yourself saying what you do, or when people ask you, they might ask you your name first, but then they ask you what do you do. So that's like a
Hmm.
very, I would say, introductory question that comes up for everyone,
Hmm.
and that kind of makes us tie our own identity into the work that we do. And
Hmm.
so I would want to do something in terms of helping people uh, dissociate a little bit from this identity, realize that there is so much that can be done outside of work. And even if people are not enjoying the kind of work that they do, then helping them understand those other options. Because for myself also, I just thought that I've spent so much time doing this, I should probably continue down this road. But that's when I
Hmm.
thought, that's when an alternate thought came into my mind that, so what if I spent all this time? All this time has helped me build a strong foundation, and I can, have full freedom to switch at any point. Like I don't have to follow this route just because I've been on this. Like there is full freedom at every moment to explore something else, and I should explore something else because I'm not here to just work for let's say 40, 50 years in one company and then retire. I know in our parents generation it was very different, where they stuck to the same kind of work that they did. They worked with one company and they just retired in that company. But today people are constantly changing their jobs. I mean, I work in talent acquisition, I work in recruitment, and I see people moving every 2 to 3 years, and even much lesser than that. Now people are not willing to be tied to one job or not to stay stuck to it. But there is still this pervasive notion that I still want to work, if not in this job, then another job. But there's
Hmm.
not so much of thinking of, okay, maybe outside of a job or outside of a corporate environment, also there is so many possibilities. There's so much that you do. I think the uncertainty around it or the instability that could come with it is something that becomes a blocker. So I would want to focus more in terms of helping people understand these options, or even around how they can have good mental health, good physical health, good overall well-being while being a part of these institutions, if that's what they choose to do.
Wow, wonderful. So cool. That's really interesting. So one thought that comes to my mind immediately is whenever we want to connect with people, say in the corporate world as well, like if we have the clarity in our head that what is the specific problem that we're solving, that is a much better way to actually start the conversation. Because usually what happens is sometimes like you might be aware of the root cause of the problem, but the person who's affected by that themselves are not aware. Like you might realize that hey, the reason you're actually stuck in this mess is because you have an incorrect identity. Like you have identified yourself with your role, right?
Right.
And so now if the role is coming to an end, it's like you have a crisis in your life.
Hmm.
But to realize that you are greater than that
Yeah.
is very liberating.
Right.
But the person who is in that predicament at that moment sometimes might not realize what is actually happening.
Hmm.
So, and then which is where, it's like the way we get connected with people in the first place is by actually solving their problems, right? And which is a very, very beautiful thing. Like, if you think about entrepreneurship fundamentally, that's all it is. Like, as
Hmm.
an entrepreneur, you are just solving people's problem for a price.
Right.
And that is what every company is doing. They've just figured out there's a set of problems that, like, because each company chooses a different set of problems that they want to solve.
Right.
But one of the things that I would say a lot of people have not yet realized is the kind of opportunities that the internet has actually created. And most people have not yet started benefiting from these opportunities. Now, what I mean by that is like the internet has facilitated a kind of decentralized work that could not have been possible even 20 years ago,
Yeah.
right? And there's a possibility that people can actually set up their business solo,
Hmm.
which is actually a really remarkable thing. I mean, even then, even if you do start your business solo, at some point you will want to start scaling, and then you might want to have like a team, and you want to have like a few people. But really, it's like now I would say it is so easy for even a small group of people, or even like one person, to actually start their business and start making money.
Yeah.
And it's just that, as you said, it's like people who are stuck in these environments, they don't know about their alternatives. Like, in fact, I would say to earn 2 to 3 lakh rupees a month in India is actually fairly easy. Like, you just need to solve high value problems for
Hmm.
people. And there's a
Yes.
whole lot of people who have problems that they're looking for solutions, right? And it's actually not so difficult to do this. But why do you think people kind of still are so stuck in their environment? Because this is one thing that I realized as well. It's like while you're still in the corporate environment, any idea to leave this environment eh, comes with a lot of fear, right? So what do you think is the source of this fear?
Yeah. So I think the source of the fear is pretty much the fear of the unknown, where
Hmm.
people think that here in a corporate environment, you have a clear job description, you have your responsibilities. Even if you're working in a startup environment, there is a key problem that's presented. You can see it, you know how you're working towards it. You have colleagues that are working with you on that. So it is still more structured where somebody else hands this over to you and then you work on figuring out those problems, and you have people to support you around. And now when you think of leaving this environment, you suddenly feel like, okay, but where do I start? There are so many different things. Your mind jumps all over the place because you think, what is my product or the service that I'm offering? Who am I going to offer this to? How do I get the clients? How do I sell to these clients? There is certain hesitation around selling because it doesn't always strike a positive connotation in people. They think that they're doing something wrong, or they're trying to get people in ways that don't sound right to them. So
Hmm.
I feel like there are many of these things, but ultimately it all ties down into being afraid of the unknown, and not having that certainty which you've had when you have a job, or even when you move from one job to another. Yes, each job is different from the other, but ultimately there is a strict certain set of roles. There is a certain environment that you're put into. The environment is already created. You don't have to create that whole thing from scratch, which now you might have to do, or at least your mind thinks that there's all of these things to figure out. It sounds a lot. It sounds like it's very overwhelming. So then it's easier to just stay put in that environment or move to a different job, but not think of the outside of it. Like recently, I was reading this book by Tim Ferriss, The 4 Hour Work Week.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, he says that it's crazy how people will choose unhappiness over uncertainty. Because he
Mm.
says, with uncertainty, when you think of leaving a job and starting something of your own, it's uncertain, that we can acknowledge that. But there is a high chance of certainty. There's a high chance of you being happy, that you can, put systems in place. You can start thinking along the way. You can plan things out, and you have a high chance of succeeding. You have a high chance of being happy if you do all of these things, and you can get to where you want to reach. Whereas if you continue in the same job, or if you move to another job, you know that eventually it'll make you think of the same things. It'll make you still feel stuck, or you'll still feel like you don't know why you're doing this, or you still feel disconnected from it. But you still choose that over something that can lead you to happiness. So he says how the human mind is, it's so bizarre when you actually think about it, but we always choose the path
Mm.
of unhappiness because it's certain, versus choosing something that could give us that happiness, the uncertain path.
Right. So actually, now that you mentioned this, there's a thought that comes to my mind, which makes me realize that this is actually not bizarre at all. It is to be expected. And the reason for that, and because we've had many conversations, I'm sure you kind of know my thought process. Uh, I would again go back to our evolutionary history,
Yeah.
in terms of
Right.
biology. And for millions of years, we were living in a very uncertain environment.
Right.
And any change was a potential cause of life and death. Like if there's a certain path that you're aware of, that that okay, these are the dangers over here, and these are some of the things which are okay. Or if you're like a herd that has like a migratory route, and likewise, like if you're a bonobo or a chimpanzee or whatever, and then you have a certain territory, and all of the things which are certain kind of give you a sense of comfort, right? Because in the wild, they're literally predators who are waiting to stalk you
Yeah.
and kill you,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And so any uncertainty has a high probability of death.
Right.
And that was the case for millions of years.
Yeah.
And it's only very, very recent that like uncertainty is not such a big problem in
Mm.
our life,
Right.
right? And even there, it's like, because I would say this uncertainty kind of ties back to death,
Yeah.
because at some level people are thinking that okay, if I leave this job and if I'm not able to figure out anything, I might, it's like lose all my cash, I will not have any
Mm.
money, and I'll not be able to like feed myself, I'll not be able to have a
Yeah.
house. And so it kind of comes back to that fear of death, that
Right.
you will run out of resources. It's like earlier it was a predator would catch you, but now you'll just run out of
Mm.
resources.
Yeah.
But so that's where it stems from.
Mm.
And but the interesting thing is, like, and this has been my experience, that after we step out of that fear, right? Because until that moment, what happens is that for whatever reason, almost all of your choices, your fundamental choices, are fear based choices.
Right.
And by law, when you're making all these fear based choices, your life doesn't really unfold in any other way. Like, it's like you're just the reflections of these fears kind of feed themselves back to you.
Yeah.
And only when you step out of that and you start making love based choices, it is only then that actually life starts to unfold in a magical way.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this has been my experience. So what would you say about this? It's like, have you seen anything to notice this phenomena in your life?
Yeah. So actually, when I said that, oh, it's so bizarre that people would choose uncertainty over unhappiness, at that point, I started thinking of, yeah, it's actually not that bizarre, because based on our evolution, this was. But without the evolutionary context, if you just look at the fact that people are always willing to choose something that will continue to give them unhappiness versus explore something else which could give them a possibility of happiness, then that definitely sounds very strange and counterintuitive. That why would you choose this when you know that there is a chance of happiness? But yeah, that goes back to us wanting that certainty in life, or wanting clarity and wanting to know everything, or not being open to going on a journey of discovery and figuring these things out.
Nice. All right. So then, coming back to the problems that you would like to solve for the corporate world, right? So in your uh like, if you just to give free rein to your mind, and if you just dream the highest dream, right? So what kind of stuff do you see yourself doing? Like, what kind of offers do you have for people? What are the ways in which you're actually upgrading their life? And are you working mostly with corporate clients in India, or are they like all around the world? So what do you kind of see for yourself?
Yeah. So right now I'm still in the early stages where I'm trying to even develop the skill of visualization or imagination, because earlier I used to find when I'm even dreaming, then I would automatically start having conflicting thoughts that even stop your dream. And
Hmm.
for me, that was also so crazy that we're not even able to dream in peace, that our mind has these thoughts that come up even when you're dreaming. Like, suppose if I'm thinking that, oh, I would love to go and live in the mountains somewhere, then suddenly another thought is like, oh, but how will you survive in the mountain? You're so used to growing up in a big city, you're used to having your family around, you're used to all of these things. So automatically that kind of comes in the way. Then I have to move that thought out and be like, continue on my mountain dream, and
Hmm.
then keep building on that. So the visualization and the dreaming also has been more recent in terms of actively building that out, because my mind would take me in different directions, or I would have certain blockers that come up,
Hmm.
which was crazy to me, that even in my dreams I'm not able to be free to think about how I want to think, or so some of, I guess, society's impact or even my own are coming over them. But coming back to the question in terms of how do I see myself serving others, or how can I actually benefit them, I know that I've always been interested in different alternative therapies. And for me, it's also strange that we call it alternative, and the mainstream is that you go down the, if you're feeling unwell, or you physically or mentally or whatever, the mainstream is that you go down the so-called scientific route or the conventional route of getting medicines and getting cured by that. But for me, growing up in a family also which has always promoted more holistic healing, or more staying away from medicines because of, again, the uncertainty around it and the kind of side effects it can cause and things like that. So I've always been very interested in learning about different kinds of healing therapies, whether it's certain physical things that people do, and I've received some of these myself, like acupressure, acupuncture, for example, or even I was in Oroville a couple of months ago, and there I tried out a Watsu session. I'd never heard of Watsu before, but
Hmm.
something pulled me to it, because I've always enjoyed the experience of being in water and seeing the kind of healing that water can have on people. And that's why a lot of people love going to the beach, for example, and just
Hmm.
kind of feel very energized over there, or they feel like I think water has a lot of healing effects and a lot of therapeutic effects on people. But yeah, I found myself drawn towards learning more about these things in theory and in practice. So I would definitely, in my dream also, I would want to try and think bigger about how any of these or a combination of these practices also, even
Hmm.
something like uh, trying out sound healing or sound meditation and seeing the effects that that have on the body. So some kind of combination of these things is what I would want to explore more about, and think about how I can inculcate some of these. So first, I guess probably being open to receiving more of these, being open to be more conscious and aware of how these are making me feel, and then think about how I could grow further in them. And along the way, I've benefited so much from various mentors, life coaches, like yourself included. So I would want to have some kind of a practice around involving these therapies, whether a bunch of them or specific ones, along with the knowledge that you've been able to provide, or other coaches have been, other coaches, mentors, or even books and podcasts, videos, all of these have been able to provide. So kind of string together and piece together some of these things with helping people. And I don't think of corporate clients, I think of individuals within the company that are working, because ultimately I would want to be able to benefit one particular individual rather than a whole company.
Hmm.
Um, because I feel like that individual can then have a ripple effect in terms of spreading it to the people around them, and the people in their family, their community, and so on. And I think at the individual level, to me personally, I feel like it's a lot more helpful because I see how I've been benefited from these things. Maybe if there was a similar training done at the company level, then it might not be as personalized, or it might not be, you might not feel like you've gotten that much of an impact versus at an individual level, and then you can take it forward. I mean, there are pros and cons to both. There
Hmm.
you're having a larger scale when you go to a company. At an individual level, I feel like might be more personalized, or
Hmm.
the person themselves is seeking that, and that's why they're more open to receiving it versus at a company. Let's say somebody comes and gives a webinar or a talk at the company, and the employees are not open to it, or they just feel they think, oh, this is just another corporate training. Like I don't,
Hmm.
want to pay attention to this. Like I'd rather just do my work or just leave early and not bother with this. I think both have their pros and cons, but I would definitely see myself working more with individuals rather than corporate clients.
Definitely. So this has also been my experience. Before I kind of got into doing what I do now, like I was actually doing corporate workshops. Like I used to work with this company called Focus Adventure, and we used to do these workshops with like large corporates like BCG, McKinsey, Deloitte, HUL, PNG, all of these guys, And like the workshops would have like 300, 400 people sometimes, and it's like, and they would be like 2 day, 3 day events. But the thing is, in terms of impact, like when everyone has fun, it's like we make sure that everyone's having a really good time, they're laughing, and it's like and there's some utility that comes out of it. But I realize it's not like a very deep transformational impact that we can have on people. It's like a very surface level thing. And so what I realized in my own experience is that if you want to have a deep impact on someone, then you have to work with them for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
Like, because it's not that people are lacking information in our world today, because there's an abundance of information. What they're lacking is usually implementation, right? And in order to integrate ideas into ourselves, like we need to practice, we need to do different things, and different people get stuck at different points. And I think that's where a mentor comes in. It's like helping you get unstuck wherever you are, and helping you like integrate those things into your life. And so that is what I experienced more recently, that in the last few years, that it's far better to work with people over a long period of time than to just do something for like a very large scale of people without really having that context.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
completely agree.
Wonderful, wonderful. Cool. So, next thing that I want to understand from you is like what has been your experience in headhunting for like these higher level positions? So, because let me ask you like the nature of my question, because this is kind of like the dream that a lot of people are dreaming. It's like there's so many people through the education system as they're growing up, that is what they're aspiring to. They want to become like the VP of this company, or the CEO, or the managing director, or like the CFO or something like that. So now you have been headhunting for like senior level positions as well. So you've been interacting with all of those people. So now these people are at the position what a lot of other people are actually dreaming of,
Mm.
right? So what are the things that you noticed about like these people? Like, is so is this like a good dream that a lot of people are dreaming of, or is there like a lot of delusion over there? Are there things that people who are aspiring to this stuff are not able to see? So what has been your experience in interacting with a lot of these people?
I would say that I was myself one of those people who thought that I would, go up the ranks and become one of these senior leadership team members. And I would say that there are a lot of them who are very happy in their roles. They're, at a certain position where they're not open to exploring new opportunities because they feel like they've spent so much time and effort getting to where they are that they rather
Hmm.
stay put in that. So when we speak to them about exploring other opportunities, they're not open to it. I know at that level, things change where people think way beyond their compensation and the other aspects of their salary. They think more in terms of impact and what kind of purpose they want to have. Of course, compensation is still an important factor. They would want to either be at the same compensation. I've seen people even being open to taking salary cuts and coming at a lower compensation if it means that they can work on something from scratch, or they can work on building something up grounds up, and they can have more of an impact. They can be part of shaping um, a company's journey, because I used to work with a lot of startups. So a lot of senior leaders would be open to even taking a pay cut and coming to an environment where they can have more ownership, they can have more responsibility, they can have more, say in terms of growing things up from an early stage. So that made me realize that, okay, at that level, these kind of things around compensation becomes more, um, it doesn't weigh in as much on their decisions as in terms of the kind of impact they can have, the kind of interests that they want to align with. Because at that point, people are looking more at like what are their interests well aligned with. Let's say a startup is in an education field and they feel personally more drawn to that field, or in healthcare, then they're more willing to consider that, even if they've never worked previously in healthcare or in education, because now they feel connected to the mission of that company. And compensation and these other factors become a little bit more in go more towards the background and don't become the focus of their work. So I feel like even when they've reached the peak of their careers, where other people are, envious of that position, other people are really yearning to be in that position, they're also continuously seeking something else, where they're also seeking more meaning, more impact. They're living the kind of lifestyles that they wanted in terms of financially, but they are still seeking in terms of the kind of work they can do, the kind of impact that they can have. What else can they do that would be meaningful for them? Because probably what they've done until now has gotten them there, but it's still not enough. There is something beyond that, which is outside of the financial domain. It's more to do with these things around their impact, around the kind of purpose they can have, around what kind of mission they can align with. And they're also seeking something where they can have more of a say in that particular, have more be a part of, be able to make those decisions and be able to have a bigger say compared to where they're currently at.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, cool. So then, so that's one thing, so the kind of impact that they want to have. Now, the next question that I have for you is that in terms of these corporate environments, how aligned do they tend to stay to what they, originally intended to accomplish? Right? Because sometimes what I noticed is, because see, you've been with startups and you've been with like different companies. So the thing is, like for me, I started my career in, I was working for an investment bank, and then later I worked with Pepsi after my MBA, and then I was working in corporate training. And so it was very interesting for me because like what I noticed is like in my corporate experience that first thing I saw this thing called corporate double speak. Like I saw that there's like a language that everyone, like you have to learn this, like when they hire you, for the first few months you have to like learn this language. It's like a different kind of English that you have to figure out, that it's like that the messages need to be communicated in a certain way. But this was also true because the organization I worked with was like fairly big global entity. But I realized that this is quite detrimental to the organization, right? And also the other thing I noticed, when I was working with Focus and I was helping doing these workshops for like many different corporate companies, like I saw this overall tendency in different companies of people not being so happy. Like they would come for these offsites, and like I would mostly see people are not really enjoying their life so much. It's just little bit of fun for them would also be like a big deal, and that would really shock me to the level to which these people are not having fun in their life, right? And the other thing that I noticed is how like companies, they set out, they say that okay, this is the problem that we want to solve and this is what we want to do, and they'll talk a lot about their integrity, and they'll talk a lot about like all of these their values and principles, and they say all of these things. But when it comes to actual actions, like I noticed often there's like a deviation, right? Because as they start expanding and things start happening, they tend to deviate. So what has been your experience? It's like, do you feel like companies tend to stay with what their objectives are, or like do they deviate? And if they're deviating, like why does this happen?
Yeah. So I would say I agree with what you're saying. The companies set out with these big grand plans, and that's how they're able to even bring employees in, like, even in talent acquisition, when we're speaking with candidates, they're always keen to understand that why should I consider this company? There are so many other opportunities over there. So we are also selling them on that same goal, on that same mission of this is what we're doing, whether we're revolutionizing healthcare or education or finance or whatever it might be. So we are selling them on these big dreams. And when they come in, depends of course on which level that you come in, but no matter what level you do kind of, again, depending on the company and the size of it, but your focus tends to become more narrow. You get more caught up in the day-to-day operations of things, the day-to-day running of it, that many times you're really far away from that goal, or you're not even thinking of that in your day-to-day. You're just so caught up in the daily meetings that you're doing, on the kind of targets that you have and being on track with those, making sure your team is doing everything right. So you get caught up in these day-to-day events where you're not even thinking about that bigger picture, or you kind of you don't see yourself creating the kind of impact that was told to you. So there definitely is that misalignment where people come in having these big dreams or these big goals of wanting to achieve this, and then getting caught up in the mundane things of their routine, and not actually being able to do that. And that's when then they think of, okay, what's next, and possibly looking at another company, maybe a smaller company where they can have a bigger impact. But they don't think about the fact that the structure of any company itself is such that no matter where you go, you will still be in this sort of a, cog in the machine, where you are still um, caught up in those particular things of the day, and the impact is limited to that particular environment. And what you're saying around the happiness also, I feel like people don't feel that happiness in these corporate offsites, or even if they feel it, it's more short-lived because they're going back to the same environment in which they felt unhappy. So even if it's a brief pause from that, or a brief getaway where you go to another place, and let's say you have your colleagues and you're all having fun, but in your mind you're probably already thinking of all the work that's there that you have to do when you go back, or you think of the fact that you're going back and returning to that environment. So I would say that also affects their happiness, because they already know that they're unhappy somewhere. So if they're going somewhere else, it's very temporary, and they know that they're coming back to that same thing. I remember in my previous job, and this was my experience. This was other colleagues also had shared this experience, where many times the companies would organize events for everyone to hang out outside of work, and people would feel like it's such an obligation to go there to connect with your colleagues. You'd feel like, I'm already spending 8 hours at my job, like I don't want to see these same people again now, in another setting, like let's say at a party, or go to a movie with them, or whatever else. You feel like I would rather that they cut down my working hours so that I can take those hours and go and spend time with the people I actually want to spend time with, my family. I mean, yeah, you might love working with your colleagues, which was my case. I really had a good environment and I liked working with my colleagues. But when it came to these additional things, I would think of it as like another chore, where it's like, okay, now this is something I have to do in on top of work. It's not something that would be substituted. Like, it's not like you have a half day and the half of the day you go somewhere. It's like you have a full day, you're going and spending more time with these people that you may or may not like. So overall, I feel like that would make people not very open to these trainings, or not yeah, the trainings you were mentioning, or even just fun events. People would find other excuses about it, because they would think that, I'm just spending more time with these people when I would rather spend that time doing things that I actually enjoy.
Right. So that's actually a really interesting point that you bring up, that these people, when they're switching from one company to the other, thinking that, okay, the cause of dissatisfaction is this thing, not
Hmm.
realizing that the cause of dissatisfaction is the structure itself.
Yeah.
And so now, so that kind of brings me to this idea that, so if we want to actually solve this problem, so we'll have to solve a structural problem.
Hmm.
And which is where I think what is happening now, and this is also part of the process of evolution, right, where technology is kind of making it easier for people to kind of, I would say, decentralize a bit more,
Hmm.
because you're able to form smaller structures, like far smaller, it's like where you can actually start doing lots of meaningful, valuable things by working even alone, or in a very small tight team of, say, 3 4 5 people,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's quite a remarkable shift that is happening. But I would say again, it's like not a lot of people have already realized that, and they've not started using these things to their advantage. And I would say maybe some role also is there because of the school system, because
Yeah.
the education system kind of drilled down this idea of some authority figure telling you what to do.
Hmm. Right.
And for 20 years, or at least 15 years of your life, you've been in this loop where somebody is telling you that, okay, this is the question, solve this, this is
Yeah.
the geography thing, do this. And it's like, what are they're just giving you these
Hmm.
directives.
Right.
And probably again talking about this uncertainty, like when you're not in that environment of being given a directive, so that's something that's very new for a lot of people. And which is why, like in these companies, like which is what the leader is supposed to be doing, like the managing director or the CEO,
Hmm.
right? Like
Yeah.
they are the person who is giving all these directives. But then a company that has like 5,000 people, well, all the other people are essentially just executing their level or their little piece of the directive
Right.
that has come down,
True.
right? And so I would say that also has a huge impact, because when you break away from this, then you have to make your own directives and you have to be responsible for yourself. And like, unfortunately, people are not experienced in doing that, so they feel
Yeah.
a bit uncomfortable with that as well. It's like,
And they also
cool.
feel like people around them are in the same loop where other people are doing this. They see people older than them, maybe their parents, or maybe other family members, or just in society they see other people are working in these companies. If they're not happy, they move to another company. They don't
Hmm.
see examples of people who left it and started something of their own, or have are freelancing and taking on clients, or set up their own company and then started growing a team. There's a lot more of people that continue from one job to another. That's what they see, and in their mind, that makes sense to them because of
Hmm.
what they're seeing, or because of the certain structures that are there, and what, like you mentioned, what has been told to us from school and then continues on. So, so that option of exploring something else, even if that does come up to them, it seems too uncertain, and it seems too risky to consider that. They'll tell themselves stories that, right now I have a family to feed, I have certain responsibilities to take on, maybe I have a house loan, or I have this or that, and that's all holding me back from exploring something. But somewhere deep in, um, there is there are those feelings or those thoughts of, I would want to be free, or I'd want to probably do something of my own, and I'm stuck in this thing, which is why I can't do it. Like, you eventually accept that situation, and you that becomes your reality, that this is what I'm in, and this is how it is, this is how everyone is, and everyone's living their lives. So why should I deviate from this, is what
Hmm.
people tell themselves, and then kind of stay stuck in.
Right. Cool. So then, for you to unstuck yourself and set an example, and then it's like share more light in the world. So I would ask you, what are the key takeaways that it's like you would, I would say, like in your 6 to 7 years career, that you would actually acquire from the corporate world, because ultimately we have to agree that the corporate world is the one that is able to have like a massive impact on the planet,
Yeah.
right? And I think like this is like on one side we might talk about the corporates, but like on the other side, because see, I quit the corporate job and I went on to the spiritual path, and I noticed that, hey man, it's not like this side is like completely clean and everything is like perfect and sunshine and rainbows. Like there are equal set of problems on this side as well, right?
Right.
And I think one of the biggest challenges on the spiritual side is uh, this aversion towards all of these like economic things,
Hmm.
which are actually very beneficial and they're very effective,
Yeah.
right? I would say, like modern society has become so beautiful, like like the kind of facilities that we have are unimaginable. Like our ancestors have fought for these things, they have died for these things, and they've worked so hard to create the environment that we have today, and we take it for granted,
Hmm.
right? Like it's really like it's so insane for me to just imagine that life is so good, I can just have a few conversations with a few people, and in exchange now I get these units, and I can give this unit to somebody and they will give me mangoes.
Yeah.
Like, wow. So it's like, it's so easy. I just need to talk and I can get mangoes and I can get a house and I can get all of these things. And that's insane, truly.
Yes.
And because earlier I would have to I'm up against ants on the mango tree, right? Like if you're trying to climb the tree, then you see there's like, because most of the mango trees I've noticed have like lots of red ants.
Yeah.
And like, but your body becomes strong, obviously, as a monkey. It's not like, you're free from ants. You're like running around all these trees and stuff like that.
Mm.
And well, from that stage, we came to this stage because of all the, progress that happened. And I think coming to the next stage, like we would have to actually merge the skill sets from both the sides. Like spirituality has to integrate more into practicality, and practicality has to integrate more into spirituality, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is what will bring about this age of abundance, right? When both the sides can kind of learn from each other's. And I think that there is a lot that, say, the people who are more spiritually inclined can actually learn from the corporate world, especially in terms of effectiveness and the ability to actually get things done,
Yeah.
right? Because this is a big bottleneck that I've seen is with the spiritual people. Sometimes they have all these ideas and they're like living in the clouds, but when it comes to like practically moving the needle forward,
Mm.
they're not very efficient at it,
Yeah.
right? So what would you say are some of the most valuable lessons or the valuable skills and tools that you have acquired in the last 6 to 7 years from your corporate life?
Yeah. So I'd say one of the biggest ones is in terms of having a clear goal at the top of the organization and then having that trickle down to every layer, every seniority level that a person is, each different team that they are in. Because that way you have a big goal in mind, let's say to make um, X million in revenue. And then that's coming down to each of the different teams that are responsible for that revenue. One portion of that is coming down to them, and then to each person within that team. So each person is held responsible and accountable for that, and everyone knows what it is that they are responsible to deliver against, and then measured, whether it's measured quarterly or monthly or even every 6 months or every year, whatever your performance is measured. So you know clearly what you're responsible for, and that brings a lot of structure because then you can work from there backwards in terms of what do I need to do to deliver against this thing that I'm responsible for. So I would say having that clear goal and then having that come down to each person in the organization is definitely something that corporates do really well. And then aside from that, this kind of a structure where you're making use of your time in a valuable, in a more efficient manner. You're valuing your time. So, for example, meetings have a very specific agenda of like these are the points that we want to cover in this meeting, or even deciding that you know a meeting might not be needed at this point. We'll just send an email and or just send a document and it's clear from that. So in the corporate world, I've seen with my experience in the companies I've worked at is that your time is valued where you have a specific topic that you're discussing around. It's not like an open agenda that you just come in and you discuss, because the agenda brings you back to the point. It helps you save time, and everyone is on the same page. You in many of the meetings we've even sent the agendas beforehand so people can prepare accordingly and be to the point, value that time for everyone. So I
Hmm.
think that's also something that has helped a lot in terms of, and it connects back to that goal because we're all looking after that same goal and managing our piece of that puzzle in
Hmm.
making that complete picture. And then in that, some of the smaller steps would be valuing our own time and sticking to the agenda of that meeting. And in that also there is time kept at the end for anything else that people want to discuss. So it's kind of a combination of you get your main work done and then you still keep time open for anything else that people want to discuss that is outside of this agenda, or they just want to chit chat. So you're kind of combining that also, where you're not making it like this is just what we'll stick to. You have kept some flexibility, you have kept some time for people to discuss things outside of that specific agenda. But overall, you've managed your time well to be able to get you closer to that goal. So I would say these are a couple of things that I've seen that has worked really well for organizations, and something that this people who are working in the spiritual world can definitely learn in terms of these things. And organizations never shy away from making people aware of these goals, or making them aware that they're not delivering against these goals. So
Hmm.
holding each person accountable for that, because then it's something that is, firstly, the goal itself is more tangible, where you have a certain thing assigned to each person, even if it's whatever level that they are, even if it's an intern. If they're, let's say, an intern for 1 month, you have a specific project that you want them to work on, and this is what they have to deliver. So each person knows what they're responsible for. And then having regular meetings with your supervisors, whether it's once a week or twice a week, or then if you move into once in 2 weeks, just keeping you on track of that goal. Because you can have a goal, but then if people are not actually working towards that, then there's no point of it. So
Hmm.
having that goal, and then having a structure, and having that progress being tracked towards that goal. So some organizations, like the one that I'm currently working in, it's fully transparent, where everyone can see each other's goals. You can see how much another person has achieved towards that goal, which can go both ways. It can also make people more accountable for their work. They're aware that anyone else can see this. Or sometimes if you feel like you're far behind on your goal, then you might also feel like there's more pressure, because people can see, everyone can see how you're doing and how well or
Hmm.
how not so well you're doing. But I think it's important to track it, whether it's publicly or it's privately. It's important to track how people are doing, and to be able to have those constant progress sessions with the leaders, with your supervisors, so that you know whether you're on track. You have that regular feedback. Otherwise, sometimes it's like once a year you'll have a performance review. But in the
Hmm.
companies that I've seen, that I've been working with, and which are really good in getting to those goals, they have regular feedback loops, where
Hmm.
both sides are giving each other feedback. The employee also is empowered to communicate what kind of problems they're having, what's not working out for them, what do they want to improve. And then, of course, the manager also communicates what are the areas of improvement, what's going well, what's not going well. So regular tracking of that goal helps you get to that overall goal, and helps keep everyone accountable, helps keep everyone aware also of where they're at, and what is that gap that they need to get to where they need to be, or get to where the organization needs to be.
Wow, wonderful. That actually gives me a lot of really interesting ideas. So, well, in fact, that kind of gives me an idea that all of these things can be integrated even deeper into Enlightened Healers program and the tribe that we're building. And because my intention for the Enlightened Healers tribe is to just actually just create and build a tribe of healers, who are there to like support each others, and who are there to like help each others reach their maximum potential, and where we are able to a do whatever it is that we have come to the planet to offer, give that, and share our gifts, and it's like expand consciousness and share our light with the world, but also to do it systematically, to have the systems and structures around it, like because as I said, oftentimes the spiritual people are kind of not investing so much in the business side of things, like
Yeah.
because I've seen there so many times people who are so good with respect to say yoga or different kind
Mm.
of healing modality, they must have invested like so much time and energy, like
Yeah.
sometimes even decades of their life
Mm.
in getting better and better at that stuff, but they have not invested any of their time and energy in the basic business skills,
Mm.
and because of that they end up suffering, right?
Yeah.
And so the intention of this is to like plug in all of those gaps, so that
Yeah.
people are able to uh, operate at their highest potential, and it's like, and they're able to share their gifts with the world in the most optimal way. So wonderful. So I'm so happy, and thank you so much for sharing all of this with me, and this gives me some ideas, and we can actually start implementing some of these ideas in the Enlightened Healers program. And with that, welcome to the Enlightened Healers program as well, since you joined today, right? I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy to have you on board.
Yeah, same here. I'm excited. I know that it's something that has always been at the back of my mind, and then I was like, I need to bring it to the front of my mind. I need to actively take charge of it. I can't just keep being passive about it, and just keep continuing on in the same path of working at a job, or thinking about, okay, the next job and the next. I know that there is something bigger out there, that I feel called towards, and that I need to take steps towards it. So I think it's wonderful that you're already running this program, and that it comes at the right time. Also, I feel like I'm ready for it. So it's come, it's perfect timing, and Yeah, very excited to continue to explore together, because earlier I was also in that space where I felt very overwhelmed by the possibilities and by all the options. While
Hmm.
on one side it can seem so amazing that you have all of this access or you can do whatever you want, and on the other side there is some fear associated with it. It's like, okay, I have all of this stuff, but there's nobody that can guide me through this, versus in
Hmm.
a corporate world where you have those structures and you have someone who is responsible for your performance and someone who's telling you what to do. So it was a little daunting in terms of how do I even go about this. So it's great that you have a program like this where you can help people become more comfortable with even the journey of discovery, because sometimes we're so used to just going after those results or just wanting those results and wanting them immediately. We're in a world of wanting instant access to things, whether it's our food or it's our internet and our information online or anything else. We're so used to having things instantly and on the spot. We don't want to wait even 2 minutes for a video to load. So it's like, okay, with our careers or with what we want to do next in life, are we willing to give it that time, that patience, and go on that journey of discovery? Because that itself can also be can teach you a lot. I know my previous journey and my current journey also in the corporate world in different roles, continue to grow into it, has also been rewarding. I have been able to learn a lot, and it has also made me aware of the limits of it and what can be outside of it. So having a program like this that a person can go through and feel supported by, have other people in the community that they can connect with, have mentors and life coaches that they can rely on, would definitely fill in all those missing pieces of the puzzle and help a person get to where they want.
Wonderful. So I'm so happy that you've joined this. I'm really excited for the journey going forward, because for me the intention is to build a long-term tribe. Because and I see that's how we can actually have the kind of impact that we really want to have. And this is something that I see as, because it is our uh, journey to create these new systems and structures. Because it's not that someone somewhere is going to come and do something. We also have a responsibility,
Yeah.
right? And this is what I realized, even with my relationship to God. Like,
Hmm.
I realized at some point in my life that, hey, God is not something that is out there, and it's like uh, I have to rely on God for everything.
Yeah.
There's an aspect of God inside me as well. And
Hmm.
what that means is that the same creativity that, like, of course, the universe is so kind and blessing me with all of these things,
Yeah.
but I also have my own responsibility, which is,
Right.
as a part of this universe, as a part of God, as a part of
Hmm.
creation, like, I also have to contribute towards the creation of the new.
Right.
And so, which is like, in my mind, the way I see it is two things. It's like, one is consistently to dream the highest dream that I'm capable of dreaming.
Hmm.
Like, what does that look like? And then start filling in the pieces to start moving in that direction, so that how can we
Yeah.
actually manifest this dream into reality? Not just
Hmm.
dreaming and stopping at that level, but taking whatever actions that I can in this now moment to
Yeah.
move one step closer to that dream.
Right.
And that way is, I realized this is the best collaboration that I can have with the universe.
Hmm.
And as soon as I start doing these things, I see that the universe starts like supporting in unimaginable crazy ways.
Yeah.
Right.
True. Yeah, completely agree. I think it's a matter of taking those initial couple of steps rather than thinking that you need to have the whole thing figured out. Like even for me, when we were talking about the Enlightened Healers program and getting into it, and I said, oh, but I don't know what I would be offering to people. Like, what am I supposed to actually, what kind of service am I providing? And you said that it's you don't have to have all of that figured out. You need to first start being open to it, start taking those steps, and then these things will start falling into place. Of course, action is required from my side, and then also consistently trust and have faith that the universe is also bringing me all of these opportunities. Because when I look back at some of the previous steps I've taken, whether with different jobs or even within the same job, moving to different levels, a lot of it was a combination of action from my part and the universe having brought me those experiences that I needed to have at those points.
Hmm.
So earlier I used to feel like if I'm leaving a job and going somewhere else, I need to already know everything and I need to just follow that. I need to have created the path first and then follow that path. But of course, there's a large element of, I mean, there's a really large role that the universe and God plays in our lives, where we don't need to have that whole thing figured out. We need to have the trust that we will be able to figure it out along the way, because we have something as infinite as the universe around us that is there to support.
Wow, wonderful. So on that note, I think, say that this has been a really good conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I actually look forward to having many more such conversations with you. And my purpose of doing this is, uh, like the way I see it, it's just that, like, if this conversation is first of all fruitful to you and to me, that's already a win,
Hmm.
right? And then if we just put it out there and there's like other people who might also benefit from this conversation, so every time I want to just make it even more beneficial. And as I said, first of all, to you and to me, right? Because we're primarily having this conversation, and I would say for me this has already been like a really beneficial conversation, because I would say my main takeaways from today is actually on some of the points that you mentioned that the corporates are doing really well with respect to like the goals, traveling through the organization, and being very upfront about letting people know about their bit in the contribution, and letting them know that, it's like, hey, if you're not actually doing your bit really well, just giving that feedback, and
Yeah.
having these very solid feedback systems in place. So this is something that I would actually think of how we can improve in our program as well. So that's my main takeaways from today. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is actually the first podcast I've done, and when you first asked me about it, I was thinking that, oh, what do I talk about? Like, I don't know how this is going to be and all of that. But um, it helps that that you were able to build that comfort, uh, and even I just thought of it as like we're just having a conversation, and like you said, if it's useful for you and for me, then that's already a big win. And then if it helps others, then that's always like a bonus, and that's always the cherry on top. But
Hmm.
yeah, I'm really glad that we had this, and I didn't even realize how we've been going on talking, and it's been quite a while since we've been speaking. I mean, when I thought about it, I thought probably we'll be speaking maybe for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or so on. But yeah, in the flow of things, we didn't even realize how time has passed. So it's been great.
Wow, wonderful. Sweet. Then thank you so much. And so yeah, you have a wonderful day ahead, and I will catch you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day as well. Bye.
All right. Bye bye.